make regular earthenware ceramics. But then also a very important thing to know is while you think of ceramics, you'll think of a hard clay that you mold into shape on a pottery wheel. That's not what we do here. We use a technique called slip casting, where you use a liquid clay, and I cannot tilt it too far, which is all pour out. But you think of a gray sauce, a sludge. We pour that into these molds, and these molds are made of plaster, which is a very porous material. So if you pour it all the way up to the top, the plaster will start to absorb the water from the clay, but the hard clay particles, they will stay stuck inside and they will stick to the walls of the mold. So after a couple hours, you have a wall that starts to form along the inside of the mold, but the core will still be liquid because it dries from the outside towards the inside. After those initial hours, you pour the liquid core out, but all of the hard bits, they stay inside. So that's how you get a hollow item by using these molds. You leave it to dry in the mold for a little bit longer because when it dries, it shrinks, it comes loose from the sides, and then you can safely take your mold apart and take your item out. So now we are looking at our very talented painter Leo over here. When these painters have to start painting their pieces, they start out with the bisque. So the piece after is first firing, and it can be very intimidating to start a project because you just have a completely white canvas and you have to start somewhere. But to make that process a bit easier, they have these little stencils. So this is a piece of plastic molded in the shape of the item, perforated many times. So if I move it around, you'll see the light